What's up, everybody? I just got back from Adepticon, and I gotta say that I think it has already become my favorite convention of the year. Now, I've gone to a lot of the major conventions in the United States over the course of the past year or two, and Adepticon really stands out to me because it's got a super clear focus on wargaming. A lot of the other conventions have plenty of RPG stuff and board game stuff, and that stuff is all really cool and I like it, but Adepticon feels really different because it's just about wargaming and painting. So while the convention may not be as big as some of the other conventions, walking around the hall, there is not a single booth that I'm not interested in. Pretty much every single exhibitor there is somebody that I want to go check out and spend some time looking around their stuff. And the other really cool thing about Adepticon is it's a really great opportunity to meet a whole bunch of people, both in the industry as well as other content creators and fans. It's a really good time. I got to go hang out with the guys at Wing to Star Publishing and even go to a seminar that they were doing about becoming a writer, especially in the area of IP writing, which was really interesting, and they talked about some of the stuff that I talked about with Brandon on the interview I did a couple weeks back. I also got to meet Craig Gallen, who was hanging out with them. He is the author of the last Infinity novel, and that was a book that I really enjoyed. I also did a video about that last summer, so it was pretty cool to get to meet him and talk to him a little bit about the book. They were showing off the next Infinity novel, Earhart, and unfortunately there's still only paper copies of that book available as of right now. The digital version's been delayed, and I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on that so that I can dig in. One of the people that I got to meet for the first time was Jet from Warlore. Now, he's somebody that I've known on the internet for a really long time now, but we've never had a chance to meet in person, and we got a chance to hang out a bunch while we were at Adepticon, so when we got back, we decided that we would jump on a video call and sort of chat about some of the cool stuff that we saw, because even though I was there for 4 days, there was definitely stuff that I missed.
This is only my second Adepticon. I go to Origins most years because Origins is in Columbus, Ohio, not too far from me.
Now, of course, I spend a lot of my time at the convention volunteering with Weird, so I was putting on demos of the other side, which was really cool. It was nice to see that there seems to be a lot of excitement around this game. It's definitely a favorite of mine, and it's unfortunate that it came out right before COVID, so it kind of fell flat. But with all the new stuff that's coming out for it, and the 2 new factions that are coming to the game as we speak, it seems like there's a lot more buzz around it than there has been for a couple of years now. And there was a whole bunch of people there picking up the starter set as well as the Kimono Allegiance box, and folks who were just coming up to get a demo in or playing some of the participation games that Weird was putting on. So, super awesome stuff. If you didn't see, I did post a short while I was there that was a quick walkthrough of the booth and highlighting a couple of the new items that were available for sale that we haven't seen before. Now, this stuff is available on the Easter sale right now, so it's not really news anymore, but I got a chance to check out the alt Alphonse, who is all hulked out, as well as the new alt for the Pale Rider. On top of all that, they had the Vagrant Song miniatures shown in the case there, which is really cool because they haven't really shown those off yet except for in some renders and art. Now, I also ran some Through the Breach games while I was there, which was a lot of fun because I haven't actually run that game in person in a really long time. And it was even more interesting because I got to take a look at some of the upcoming stuff for the Explorer Society expansion, which is still currently in beta testing. Now, there were a whole bunch of other weird events going on, including a tournament and cupcake matches and Bonanza Brawl. Shout out to Brandon from the Danger Planet for running most of that stuff. But I actually didn't get a chance to participate in any of it because I had other stuff going on. But Jet did participate in an interesting event that they had going for Infinity.
On Thursday, I played in the Infinity Narrative event. And that was pretty silly.
Very cool.
They tried to make it a little bit like a mega game, so it's got tournament vibes, but it wasn't a tournament. Like a mega game is like a big role-playing activity with sometimes it's got mechanics there was one I participated in that had something like XCOM, right? Where there were a bunch of different players playing as different countries, but also there was an alien invasion happening.
Mm-hmm.
There was a game master. It was pretty cool. So this wasn't quite that level. I think they were approaching it. I would have liked to see more, but it was pretty interesting where there was a bunch of silly storyline going on. All the missions were related to the ongoing storyline. I would like to see more stuff like that next year. We'll see. I think it's a really interesting structure for a tournament to have this metagame aspect. Yeah, I was able to get into that and a 2v2 tournament, which was also a blast. It was another Infinity event, 2v2. Had a blast. Great time. But, aside from that, it was just really tough to get into a lot of the cool events.
Yeah.
It was really sad.
Yeah, I know the Malifaux tournament sold out in a day, and there was a wait list that was comparable to the size of the amount of people.
Yeah, dude, for real. Same thing. I signed up for Malifaux events. Well, I tried to. Yeah. It just didn't happen.
Now, walking around the vendor hall, a lot like at any other convention, it's basically just a big room full of different miniature wargame companies who are selling their stuff and putting on demos and showing off new games. And I was pretty surprised that there was a whole bunch of games here that I had never heard of before. I keep a pretty close eye on the industry in general, even though there's certain things that I obviously care a lot more about than others. But I was pleasantly surprised to see that there was a whole bunch of smaller companies here who were showing off new games that they were working on. And I always like to see smaller companies and independent designers who are putting together their own projects. And there's a lot of really cool and interesting stuff out there. Now, Corvus Belli is obviously far from a small or independent game designer. But one of the things that I had on the very top of my to-do list when I got to Adepticon was to get a demo of Warcrow. Now, Warcrow is a game that I've had my eye on for a while now, and it's a really cool-looking game. One of the things that attracted me to it in the first place was the art design and the models that they've shown off for the game, because it all looks super interesting and unique. And, of course, Corvus Belli has not only a reputation for making some of the nicest models on the market, but they're also known for their kind of unique and interesting game design mechanics. So I definitely had high expectations for what this game would look like when it finally got down on the table.
It was packed. Holy hell.
Yeah.
That Corvus Belli booth was packed all the way through.
Yeah,
I'm kind of surprised.
Yeah. You didn't have a chance to actually try it, right? But
No, I
watched it.
I taped many minutes of it, but yeah, it was just super packed. There was never an opening. Although I did get a mini because Hoopu is super cool. The quality is really high, especially for like a plastic that's not polystyrene. Like, you know, GW, Malifaux, Warlord games can all do good polystyrene, but that's so expensive. D8 using Aristea switches automatically reminded me a little bit of games like Imperial Assault or Aristea. There's a big focus on using guides, but also using abilities.
Yeah, it seems like it's going to have a lot of emphasis on positioning, which I find cool. You know, obviously it's a quick demo. We just play a couple turns with a few models, and one of the interesting mechanics is that when you run into melee combat, whoever wins the combat pushes the other unit. I think it's like about an inch or an inch and a half away. So you end up in this situation where you don't necessarily have to kill your opponent, but you can run into an objective, and if you kind of overwhelm them, you'll push them away so that you can hold the objective instead of them. Which is cool. It kind of feels like a little scrum that happens when you want to fight over an objective. There's also other resources. I don't remember what it's called, but you can kind of like stress your character to give them a boost if they have the right, you know, if it's the right.
Didn't see that. That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, that tends to be on the. I think that's only on the more powerful characters, not like the big units.
My one question also is, what are the scenarios going to be like? Infinity and Weird's game, and frankly, I'm just thinking about other games I like. A Billion Suns. Those are all games that I keep on saying are like, oh, these are games I really like. It's because they have super cool scenarios.
Yeah.
I am intrigued to see what they'll be like. Hoopu is telling us all about the starter box is going to have a narrative branching campaign, which clearly has a lot of vibes from their miniature-based board game as well, their dungeon crawler.
Yeah,
and that
Defiance
intrigues me big time.
Yeah.
They said they might do more in the future instead of just a starter box. We got to find out. Yeah, overall, I am genuinely really excited about it.
But I'm super excited because this stuff is coming very soon. They are planning to launch this box at Gen Con, so only a couple of months now before we'll actually have our hands on the actual product. Now, you might know that I've been itching for a new Halo miniatures game for a really long time, and Mantic recently announced that they're actually going to be working on one coming out later this year. So naturally, I had to go over there and get a demo of Halo Flashpoint. Now, there's a little bit of misinformation going around about this game as far as I can tell. First of all, we already know that it's not just going to be Spartans. We've already seen elites from the Banished. They were on display in the case at the Mantic booth. But the rumor is that this is just a starting point and that they plan to expand the game further beyond what we have already seen. And that could mean more species, more factions, all sorts of different stuff.
I love Halo, first of all. I'm a big fan.
Same.
I'm not skeptical. It's just that, like, there's not as much for me to be skeptical of right now. Mm-hmm. The game that we played, cool. Mm-hmm. It's a board game. I think much like some of the worst Halo games, I don't know if it'll live up to what I want it to be. Like, I would love a big war game. If it's Spartans fighting each other in, like, training, it doesn't intrigue me as much.
The reason that I'm not so worried about that is it seems like if in 3 years this game is still doing well, I wouldn't be surprised to see them expand it into a bigger, more like traditional war game type thing.
Yeah.
It seems like this is sort of like a, hey, we're testing the waters to see how this is going to do. We're establishing the core of the system and the rules and getting the miniatures out and ramping it up.
Models themselves, good quality. We were both picking them up and touching them. Good quality. I think those were hard polystyrene plastic also, right?
Yeah, they're a hard plastic. They look like they're pretty well detailed. They're also
maybe not as good as the highest quality 3D prints or anything, but far above board game quality.
Yeah.
Definitely Mantic's usual good quality.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of D8s. It definitely reminded me a little bit of their game Dead Zone, to be honest. And that's a good thing, actually. Dead Zone's a good game.
The demo was pretty quick because that booth was one of the busiest because they just
Absolutely.
announced a Halo game. So I did get a quick turn in just to kind of see how the system ran, and it seems like it's going to be a super fast game, which is appealing. It means that maybe there won't be as much crunch there won't be as much depth, but it looks like the type of thing that might be pretty easy to pick up. You can slap it down. It comes with all the terrain in the box. It's a small table size, so if you just want to
And
get a
let's
real
also say,
casual
by
game
the
in,
way, that terrain, really, really good.
it's pretty cool. Yeah,
Nice, thick cardboard,
yeah,
all pre-colored. It's diverse sizes and shapes, which I liked.
yeah.
I hope that we get more, but if this is all the only Halo we get for a bit, I might still get it because those Spartans look pretty sick to paint. I just hope we get more stuff.
The demo that we got, it was pretty surface level. They did say that like there is a little bit more depth there. There's going to be item pickups and there's objectives, scenarios, and stuff like that we didn't even touch
We
on.
were only seeing match, so I'm sure that there's going to be oddball, capture the flag, all the classics.
Right.
So overall, this one I just have to see more before I get super hyped.
I pre-ordered it because I would pay the asking price just to paint up a team of Spartans. Even if I never play it, I don't care. I want to paint the
I get it.
Spartans.
I might do the same as well, and the models are great, so
Yeah.
I get it.
Now, Jet was showing me a couple of games by a company called Electi Studios, which I wasn't familiar with, but they seemed really interesting.
So Electi Studios is a company that I was only recently made aware of. Hobgoblin, which I don't have a copy yet, but it's on its way. This one has a few proprietary components, but it's basically just a deck of cards and, markers and trackers and markers and trackers. Come on, we've all got a million things. That's going to be easy. Mike Hutchinson said that he basically had a lot of miniatures for rank and flake games he wasn't using. I'm guessing, based on what we saw, he has a bunch of Chaos Dwarves that he doesn't get to the table, and he wanted to use them. And necessity is the mother of invention. He made a rank and flank style game that has a lot of cool ideas. No removing guys off stance. You start basically skipping turn one. All the powers are super speedy, but also it's still richly thematic because he got a really good studio to work with it. I am biased because Electi Studio seemed cool, but they basically provided some amazing artists and graphic design to sort of fill out his idea for the game. So it feels a little bit, I've only tested it once, it feels to me like Warhammer Fantasy Battles, like what people like about it. Their other game looks really cool, and we both like Titanfall. This one was done by the guy who does Skullforge Studios, who apparently does all the painting of his own models that he sculpts himself, and he designed the rules. It was crazy. And I thought those sculpts, those STLs looked pretty sick too.
The mechs were some of the coolest looking mechs.
The miniatures themselves, obviously he's only selling STLs. He's not selling you logistics, but they looked really cool, and his paint jobs were pretty cool. I don't know that much about the mechanics, but his description was you've got titans and a bunch of grunts, and when the grunts die, more grunts come down to get shot.
That sounds like a really cool idea. I would love to play a game like that.
Slip Runners, which is actually designed by Andy Chambers of Warhammer fame, and is in the Zeo Genesis universe, which is the last thing I got the chance to play and I was hyped about. Super interesting. Another sci-fi war game with a lot of cool vibes, but this one's a big focus on moving stuff around, a lot of cargo stuff. I gotta play it to find out, but the graphic design of the book is amazing. Zeo Genesis, which is another game done by Andy Chambers, written by Gav Thorpe.
For sure.
The guys at Best Hobby they said they want to make a game that people actually want to play, not just a game you buy once and then never play and then sell. I respect that. That's specific. It's a very specific goal.
I feel a little called out, but I do respect it.
He was looking deep into my soul in that moment. He knew. It seems cool. Zeo Genesis, I'll admit, I've been doing some playtesting since the start. I saw it last year. I'm really hyped about it. It is inspired by retro mech stuff, a lot of 80s and 90s mecha anime, but also Western stuff. The sci-fi setting reminds me of settings like Dune a little bit, very soft sci-fi. It's got a lot of sense of mystery, which I think Gav Thorpe did a good job with. D10s, unique system where, yeah, your classic, you want to roll your target number, but because the whole point is using your big mechs, I'm excited about that. The big mechs, they go so fast. They go so fast and so far. Mechanically, I also like the scenarios. There's a war clock where instead of trying to get victory points, it's like your hit point, your morale is ticking down. Pretty interesting.
And there was a bunch of other interesting games that caught my eye as I was making the rounds. So I stopped in and got a demo of a game called Blackout. Yeah, so Blackout was really cool on the topic of Titanfall. It's a near future sci-fi game. The thing that really struck me as super interesting when I walked up and they sort of gave me like a little elevator pitch is that all the mechanics are designed by combat vets, and they are trying to make the combat feel extremely realistic. And as soon as they said that to me, I was like, okay, you have.
Hmm.
I'm intrigued. Like, tell me more about this.
Yeah.
You can obviously imagine a scenario where like wanting to make it a simulation goes way too far and it's not fun.
Yeah.
It seems like they kind of understood that when they were designing this, and they wanted it to feel realistic. I think the goal, I think they actually said this explicitly, is they wanted you to play it like it was a real tactical engagement, right? They wanted it to feel like you were making real tactical decisions, you were making maneuvers the way that a squad of like high level military operators would do it if they were in this
Interesting.
circumstance. Now, I think right there this will not appeal to a lot of people, but I also think there's another group of people who this will really appeal to. It was really interesting because it seemed like it's extremely lethal, which is something that I feel like games kind of have moved away from a lot, where things are a little bit more forgiving, and you can take a bunch of hits and you'll kind of absorb the damage, and you have an opportunity to do something about it before you lose your model and stuff like that. The game mechanics are giving you extra dice or fewer dice depending on things like cover or special abilities on your weapons, or if you have elevation over your target, things like that. You're doing opposed rolls in most cases because the opponent can actually react to what you're doing, similar to Infinity, but it's a little bit faster because it's not like you're reacting at any point along their movement, you're reacting at their final position. When you do have an opposed roll, if whoever rolls more successes puts through a point of damage, and if you fail your save, you just die. And
Hey,
that's it. And
wow.
it's they did
This all
mention
sounds cool, but I am almost worried that it becomes too simulation. Do you feel that way?
it didn't feel too simulation-y. It was a pretty fast-playing game, so it's not
Gotcha.
like you were sitting there like consulting charts and tables and stuff like that. It wasn't like it didn't really get bogged down in a lot of that stuff. I don't know. I would have to spend more time with it. I think that's a valid concern for sure. They did mention that there's some special rules that we hadn't been using. There
Sure.
are mechs in it, which is why the Titanfall thing is
They
another
look pretty
similar.
cool also, I
They're cool
can't
mechs.
deny.
They're Titanfall style. A little bit grittier. It's another game that like you don't need a lot of models to play. It's like an 8-ish model count per side.
I don't know. That's fun. I look for this is a game that I'm looking forward to. So I'm glad that you got a demo in. I'm gonna have to do some research on it. The rules are free, which is always a plus.
Yeah,
I'm gonna check that out.
yeah, a lot of good things about it. Again, I think it's one of those things that a lot of people, just based on the elevator pitch, they'll know if it's their jam or if it's
Yeah.
something that they would want to check out. But
What else did you get the chance to demo? Anything that like really blew your mind?
so I got two more. So one is Port
Yeah.
Royale. So I mentioned
Port
earlier
Royale.
Port
That looked
Royale.
so silly. I was
I'm
super into it.
I'm in on it day one. I mentioned before that I play a lot of Blood and Plunder, and this is Firelock Games, doing a skirmish style game in that vein. Really cool thing is all of the models from Blood and Plunder are just you can just put them right into this game. Apparently,
Nice.
also their stats are the same, which I didn't. It didn't
Oh,
occur to
okay,
me
sure.
until after I got the demo that like they literally just move over into this game. So if you have Blood and Plunder stuff, you can just buy the rulebook, and it'll probably come in a PDF, I
Okay,
assume,
sure. Yeah, you got
and
your
you're good.
pirates, you got your Native Americans, you got your Europeans. You're ready to go. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
really cool. The game is about like getting treasure. You're
Ah,
uh,
there's something funny about like I want treasure being the
Right.
mechanic.
But it's not like whimsical or funny. Like it is still a realistic historical I
Right, but
guess
that
like
almost makes it better
1700s.
that you're just honest. These are historical people
Well,
and they
they're
want treasure.
pirates got to get money. They got to get paid. That's their thing. So
I love
you're
it.
fighting over objectives that represent something along those lines. It's pretty interesting. This game also has a reaction system. Again, kind of similar to what we just talked about. Not as sophisticated or as complicated as AROs, but it's got a system where, actually a little bit more similar to arrows in a weird way, where if you see an enemy move, one of your models, it's only one, so there's not multiple reactions, but If you see an enemy move, one of your models can shoot at them, but they can also move or do any other actions. So
Okay.
it gives you the opportunity to sort of reposition and try to outmaneuver people and get around to objectives or get to a more advantageous position. And it seemed really cool.
Also, I mean, it helps that that when you see their boards and their setup, they're just so fun. They
Yeah.
look so cool. They hit the platonic fantasy of a bunch of pirates and stuff. They look terrific.
Breachstorm is a game that immediately caught my eye when I was hanging out at Adepticon because the art for this game is super cool looking. The guys at the booth actually told me that the artist they hired for this is actually pretty well known. He works on a bunch of video games and things like that. So if this feels familiar, then maybe you've seen this guy's art before. I think it's really cool, and there's something about an anthropomorphic tiger in a suit of armor that really appeals to me. But the game also has more traditional Space Marines, as well as a bug faction. It's got a very Helldivers vibe to it, but this game's been around for a couple years now, so they weren't directly ripping off Helldivers. I got a demo for it, and I was super into it.
Interesting. Okay.
It's another like squad-based, like small skirmishy sci-fi game, but it's got some really cool stuff that I found really interesting. So the way that it's organized is you have basically like a I don't remember the name, the technical name that they use for it, but basically you have like a squad leader, and you'll have multiple squad leaders in the game. I think it's usually going to be 2. So you'll activate a squad leader, and they have a certain number of actions, but they also have a certain number of orders. So when you activate them, you then spend your orders. You can spend them on other things, but mostly what you're going to do is spend the orders to activate the other models in the squad. So
Okay. Interesting.
so the squad leader goes and then gives out an action or gives out an order to another model near it within its like little command range. That model will activate, do its thing, and then maybe you'll walk up and then you'll give out another order to another model, and that model will walk up and do its thing or grab an objective or whatever. So it's a really interesting way to activate models. I've never seen something similar in another game. One of the things that I really liked about it is that the armies feel like they play very different. You have the more like human Space Marine armies or army that their thing is that they're really good in range combat, and they have an ability where if you get targeted, if the same model gets targeted by multiple of their models, they get a little bit more accurate every time you do it. So the idea is
I've never seen that before. I like that.
yeah, so like if you're concentrating fire, the more people that are targeting it, you're kind of getting hit by crossfire, and it makes it a little bit more accurate as it goes. The cat faction is more melee focused, and they have a resource that they can give out that gives you free extra melee attacks. And one of the ways you get that is by one of your allies dying near you. So if your opponent kills one of the cats, it gives out this resource and pisses, all the rest of the cats get super angry, and then they run in and punch you more, which is a really cool thing. They're going to add a faction to it that is lizard people, which there's a couple of ways that you can get me to just give me your money, and one of them seems to be lizard people. It's just my thing. Turns out they play like ninjas, and I was like, wow, you designed this faction just for me, and you didn't even know me when you designed this, so I don't know how you did that.
Oh man,
but
I am intrigued. I'm intrigued enough that I'm going to have to download their rules and give them a read. I just did not get the chance to interact with them because they were cool. They see the guys themselves seem nice.
Yeah,
I will have to give the rules a read.
Now, one of the most interesting things about Adepticon is that this is where they run the Golden Demon painting competition, which is a really high-profile, really well-known painting contest that attracts painters from all over the world who do some really incredible stuff. If you've been on Wargaming social media in the past week, you've probably seen pictures of all the different models that were in the display cases, and I got a chance to go up and look around at the stuff that was on display, and the stuff was just gorgeous. It will really blow your mind. Unfortunately, I really feel like pictures don't do these models justice. I've said this before, but when you see an extremely high quality, really nice paint job, seeing it in person it's totally different than seeing pictures. You kind of have to see it in real life, unfortunately. That said, I did go around and shoot some video of some of the stuff that was on display, but unfortunately the place was always mobbed, and it was really difficult to get any good video of kind of going around and checking out all of the different stuff. So I kind of just shot some highlights here of some of the stuff that really caught my eye that I thought was interesting. Obviously, there's a huge focus here on Games Workshop stuff, but I think if you are a painter, you can probably appreciate this even if you don't necessarily play those games. Now, just to touch on a couple of other highlights that we didn't talk about yet, I got a chance to check out the Parabellum booth, which had all of the Conquest models on display. And I was checking out the new faction, the Sorcerer Kings, and that was a faction that when they originally announced it, I wasn't really sure if it was something that I really liked, but seeing these models in person, I fell in love with them. They have this really cool Indian culture influence, and some of the stuff here is just gorgeous. These models are a little bigger than your typical wargaming scale, so they're actually super impressive when you see them in person because they really stand out and kind of pop. And I bet they're a ton of fun to paint. I'm actually just about to start working on my Wadroon army, which are orcs riding dinosaurs. It's pretty dope. So I'm really excited about that. I wanted to go over and get a demo because I've never actually played the game before, but unfortunately I didn't have time. Luckily there are some folks in my area that play the game, so I'm sure once I actually get the army painted, I'll probably be able to get a game in without too much trouble. Another one that looked really interesting to me was Ravage Star from the guys at Mini Wargaming. They had a really big booth with giant armies on display, which was really cool looking. And I know they were running demos of this game, but it's another one that the booth was always mobbed. And it was in a kind of back section of the floor, so it was a little harder to plan out a time when I'd be able to go over there and get a demo. But just taking a look at the models, there's obviously a huge influence from 40K here, but they do have a kind of interesting and unique look of their own, which was pretty cool. And the buzz around the game itself was pretty positive. I talked to a couple of folks who got a demo in, and they described it as feeling like 40K, but with a modern take. Hametsu was another game that really caught my eye, and this was another one that I had kind of heard of before, but I didn't really know too much about. They had this really gorgeous table on display that they were running demos on, but again, I didn't have a chance to actually get a demo. Apparently this game is set in Japan, and it's about sort of like monster hunting, and it's a co-op or solo focused game, which is really interesting to me. A lot of the models are really cool looking, and they were selling a starter bundle with the rulebook and a bunch of models that you need to play, but unfortunately they sold out like right away, so I didn't get a chance to pick one up. It's definitely one I have my eye on, and I'm probably going to look into picking it up in the future because that's a pretty cool idea, and the model's really cool. I also got a chance to check out the Dwarven Forge booth, which was really interesting to me because I've never actually seen any of this terrain in person. They make a pretty wide variety of terrain, and I know that a lot of it is RPG focused, but they do plenty of stuff that works really well for wargaming. And what was really interesting to me was when I went up and started asking questions about it, one of the first things that they did is pick up a big piece of terrain and throw it on the floor. The idea here is that the terrain is super robust and very hard to break, which is something that really appeals to me because I trash my terrain. I don't know if you guys have this problem, but transportation and the sort of use and abuse of having terrain on the table means that most of my terrain ends up broken or has to be glued back together or little pieces are missing, and it's kind of a nightmare. I'm planning to do some videos coming up on different terrain lines and what I think their pros and cons are, because that's a question that I get from a lot of new Malifaux players, especially who don't really know where to go to pick up terrain. And Dwarven Forge definitely has my attention because it seems like that sort of wear and tear issue isn't going to be quite as big of a deal, which I love. If I can just throw all my terrain in a crate and not have to worry about stacking it perfectly and padding it and making sure that I'm super careful transporting it, then that's super awesome. Plus, they have a lot of cool stuff like little lights that you can plug in and LEDs that you can swap out. So those are all really cool things. And they had a bunch of Malifaux models on one of their displays to sort of show off one of the little terrain setups. And I happen to know that a couple of people on their team are Malifaux players, which is also pretty cool. At the beginning of this year, I was going over the sort of event schedule and all the different things that I wanted to go to and shows that I wanted to see. And I was trying to figure out which ones I was going to prioritize because I obviously can't go to every single convention. And I decided to go to Adepticon because I'd never been before, and I think that this is going to become my regular every year convention because I had a blast and I can't speak highly enough about it. Now, I may still pop into some of the other conventions, especially the ones that are a little more local, but drop me a comment below and let me know, have you ever been to Adepticon or any of the other big conventions, whether they be in the United States or elsewhere? And tell me which ones are your favorite and why. Plus, let me know if you're going to be able to go to Adepticon next year because I'm already looking forward to it. And I highly recommend that if you can make the trip out, then you definitely should because it's a super good time. Now with that, make sure that you stay tuned because I will have a whole bunch of content coming up about Ashes of Malifaux, the newest expansion for that game. And I'm also planning to cover a lot of the other games that I talked about in this video in more depth in the future. So keep an eye out, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, hit the like button if you enjoyed this. Check out all the important links in the description, including the Patreon if you want to support the channel directly. And finally, huge thank you to Jet for hanging out with me and recording with me. Everybody be sure to head over to his channel Warlore and subscribe. And keep an eye out because I know he plans to cover a lot more of these games in the near future. Now, when this video goes up, the weird Easter sale is currently in full swing. So be sure to check that out if you're looking for any new models for Malifaux or the other side or Through the Breach stuff or Vagrant Song or any of the other stuff that Weird does. Because you're going to get a whole bunch of extra free stuff if you make purchases of a certain size. And consider using the affiliate link that's in the description below because if you shop through that link, then everything will be the same price for you, but any purchases that you make will actually go towards supporting this channel. And on that note, I want to give a huge thanks to the Extremely Cool Kids here on Patreon, the Steam Powered Scoundrels, Dogmatized, Devin, and the Spill Paint Pot. And thanks for watching.